Good morning. And welcome. I am Joanne Jessen, a member of the Board of Trustees of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Reston. Whether you are on Zoom or one of the lucky persons here in the church sanctuary, we are so glad you are with us this morning. It's a beautiful spring day here in Reston, and although we haven't gotten to the equinox, I think that spring has certainly arrived. No matter how old or how young you are, or wherever you are on your spiritual journey, however you identify, and whomever you love, know you are welcome here. We have just a few announcements this morning. Children in preschool through 8th grade are meeting outdoors at 12:30 p.m. today. And families, please look for links to the Religious Education RSVP and response form in the RE Today email that went out this morning. We need your responses to determine when to hold pre-K to 8th grade classes. Our service today is being led by Reverend Scott Alexander. We are joined this morning by Linda Weaver, our Director of Religious Education, Jesse Leong, our accompanist. Clara Fortner is serving as the hymn leader today, and Cynthia Young, our music director, is not here today but planned music for the service in advance. Also here today is Bob Anthony, who is serving as worship associate, and Lesley Tyson is serving as the chat usher. Ron Bracy, Maggie Mack, David Niemi, Mike Schmidt, and Amelia Turner are running the technical side of worship. Thank you all for participating in today's worship service. Now, let us center ourselves for worship. Please take some deep, quieting breaths with me. Let us enter our time of worship together as we listen to Jesse perform the national anthem of Ukraine.
May God bless and protect the people of Ukraine. So what do we do, good Unitarian Universalist friends, when our world seems to be unraveling before our very eyes? Well, the first thing we must do is refuse to unravel inside ourselves. When the world outside seems so unstable, we must maintain our interior stability, our interior equilibrium, keeping our lives on course by the light of our values, our convictions, our highest hopes and principles. So when our world spins toward violence, cruelty, ignorance, hegemony, and folly, we must keep our lives steady with compassion, reason, wisdom, and above all else in our daily lives, gentleness. Let us therefore in these troubling times remain true to the good and solid foundations of our Unitarian Universalist faith, addressing the world and all we meet near and far with the goodness and peace we dream for our world. The opening hymn.
This morning's hymn is The Fire of Commitment. If you're at home, the words will be in the chat box. If you are here with us, please hum along. From the flight of days remembered burns a beacon bright and clear, guiding hands and hearts and spirits into faith set free from fear. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when the fire with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the stories of our living rings a song both brave and free, calling pilgrims still to witness to the life of liberty. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the dreams of youthful vision comes a new prophetic voice, which demands a deeper justice built by our courageous choice. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin.
Our chalice lighting words today are by Katie Gelfand. We light our chalice as a symbol of gratitude as we celebrate the abundance of our lives together. In this sanctuary, we harvest bushels of strength for one another and offer our crop with hands of compassion and generosity. In the authentic and gentle manner of our connections, we cultivate simple sweetness to brighten our spirits. May we be grateful for the ways we nourish and uplift one another, for it is in the sharing of this hallowed time together that sustains us.
Good morning. My name is Jesse Leong. I am the accompanist here at UCR. Each Sunday, we intentionally recommit to each other by singing our covenant, Love is the Spirit of this church. We'll play our very own UCR congregational and choir virtual video. So if you're at home, the words will be in your chat box, and please sing along. And again, if you're here in person, you may hum the tune you well know. And if you are visiting us for the very first time this morning, please accept this as our blessing to you.
About that. Better.
Good morning. It is wonderful to see so many people here today and to have you joining us on Zoom on this beautiful, warm day. Our story this morning is from A Gift for Grandfather by Faye Mogensen, and it's based on an idea from a wisdom tale from the Bamboon people of Cameroon. It was Grandfather's birthday in about a week, and there were great plans for a big party with all of his family and friends, with decorations and cake and gifts. But what to give Grandfather? Maybe a shirt, or maybe a pair of socks, or perhaps a book. But all of the gifts, or many of the gifts from the year before, were still in boxes, and Grandfather's walls were lined with shelves full of books. So, what would it be? Then, someone had an idea. Grandfather's favorite thing to do was sit in his comfy chair and drink tea with honey. So honey, he had a beautiful crock or pottery jar that was empty and that each person could put a little honey in, so he had enough for all year. Word spread and people agreed they were going to bring honey. Now, Jane wanted to contribute to this gift for her grandfather, but she had no money. So she thought about it, and then she got a dark bottle, filled it with water, put in a couple of drops of yellow food coloring, then added a little cornstarch to make it thicker, and thought, this will do. With everybody bringing honey, my little bit of water won't even be noticed. So the day of the party came, and Jane went, like everyone else, into the kitchen, opened up the crock, and poured from her jar. Then she went into the big room and joined the party. When it was time for gifts, the crock was brought to Grandfather. And he said, what could this be? And everyone said, guess. Some made buzzing noises like bees. And can you help me with that? Buzz. And some smacked their lips like they'd eaten something tasty. And then he said, is it honey? And they said, try it. So he took a spoon and tried a little bit of the honey. But he frowned. And he scrunched up his face. Then, because it didn't taste anything at all like honey, It tasted like water. But when he saw the faces of his guests, he just laughed and said, "There's always next year. I have a birthday in a year." Because he knew all of them had brought water. Well, next year came along, and do you think anyone did that again? No, everyone brought honey. And when grandfather tasted it, he said, "This is the best honey I have ever tasted. I can taste the honey that each one of you brought. Jane's tastes a little bit like orange blossom. Paul's tastes a bit like clover. And Sarah's tastes like wildflowers." And he went on with buckwheat and sage and many different tastes. And then he said, "I appreciate what all of you have brought." So I wonder what gifts, maybe gifts of time, your skills, talents, or money, that you each might bring to this community and to the world. And I hope you will remember that your gifts, no matter what they are very important. They are each unique, and they are each gratefully appreciated. Thank you.
Turn it on. There you go. So now is the time in our service when we share, excuse me, our joys and concerns with one another so that no one ever has to hold them alone. If you are joining us remotely this morning, you may wish to light a real or virtual candle wherever you are, as Bob will light the candles here in our sanctuary. And those of you at home who would like to share something in the congregational chat on the screen, please write to all attendees, and remember that what you share will become public at that point. And then please read each other's joys and concerns and enter into your own time of reflection and prayer as we now listen to Jesse play our meditation music. Let us join in a spirit of prayer and oneness, please. Spirit of life and love that so faithfully animates our creation, even in its most troubled moments. We are grateful for this community of faith that is with us in both times of joy and sorrow. We especially hold in our hearts this morning all who are grieving, who face illness or disability themselves, or that in a loved one or friend. In particular, this morning, we hold in our hearts and prayers Cynthia Young, whose father died about a day ago. She's been with the family in Decatur, Georgia since Monday, and hopefully will be able to return to us in short order. Whether shared here this morning or held silently in our hearts, may our joys be multiplied in community, and may all here find comfort and calm. Amen.
There we are. I'm up here to introduce to you our next video that you'll see coming up. We have been amping up to this Sunday as Stewardship Sunday. I'm leading the efforts this year, and we have two of our longtime members, Bill and Ann Thomas, giving their testimonial this morning. They are legacy givers, and they have a wonderful message to share with you. Let's play the video.
Hello, my name is Ann Thomas, and this is my husband, Bill. We want to tell you about our decision to leave a bequest to UUCR. We joined the church in 1994 because the church represented our heartfelt values, didn't require us to subscribe to a creed, and encouraged us to go on our own spiritual journey. Now I'm going to ask Bill to give a little history of the endowment fund and how we came to our decision to leave money to UUCR.
In 2004, a member of our church, Iris Lloyd, took a terrible fall and became a quadriplegic living in a nursing home. Members of the church served in lieu of any immediate family as her support group. Our co-minister, Dennis Daniel, asked me to manage her financial affairs, and I agreed to do so. Later, Iris told me she wanted to make a new will, and I arranged for a lawyer to meet with her. In 2007, Iris passed away, and at that point, I was named in the will as executor and served in that role. It turned out that Iris left all of her considerable assets, over $950,000, to the church.
Those assets became the founding funds for our current endowment fund. This endowment fund has really served us well. We have borrowed against it to build our addition. We have used monies from it to support social action each year, and monies to support the operating fund. And in the last 2 years, when we had revenue shortfalls because of losing tenants because of COVID, the endowment fund has helped us get through these tough times. I'd like you to remember, though, that the endowment fund is not in lieu of our annual fund. It is in addition to our annual fund and the solvency of UUCR.
A few years ago, Ann and I set up a living trust, and it was natural for us to include funds for UUCR as a bequest in that trust. We are very happy to know that our support for UUCR will continue even after we are gone.
Due to the situation in Ukraine, UUCR has decided to conduct a rare second special collection for the month of March. All money collected today, apart from pledges, will be directed to International Relief Teams, a charity with a 4-star rating from Charity Navigator based in San Diego, California. international relief teams came to our attention through and was highly recommended by Alternative Gifts International, with whom our alternative gift market has worked for many years. IRT will work with local partners in Eastern Europe and use your donation to provide food, water, shelter, and other urgent necessities to families streaming across Ukraine's western borders. I cannot make an emotional appeal like Volodymyr Zelensky did to NATO, but I can say that many years ago, when I was studying in what was then the Soviet Union, I had the opportunity to visit Kiev and Lviv, both beautiful cities with wonderful people. I hope you will give generously. The offering link is in the chat box and on the upcoming slide. You may make your donation at the link, or you can mail a check to the church with Ukraine noted in the memo. Those attending in person can place their donation in the basket being passed. Thank you.
The special music this morning is A Million Dreams from The Greatest Showman. We will play you a virtual choir video, one of my favorites that we made back in 2020. And I hope you enjoy. Thank you.
I close my eyes and I can see a world that's waiting up for me, that I call my own. Through the dark, through the door, through where no one's been before, but it feels like home.
They can say it all sounds crazy. They can say I've lost my mind.
I don't care, so call me crazy. We can live in a world that we design. But every night I lie in bed, the brightness flows in my head, a million dreams are keeping me awake. I think of what the world could be, a vision of the one I see, a million dreams is all that's gonna take. Oh, a million dreams for the world we're gonna make.
There's a house we can build, every room inside is filled with things from far away.
Special things I compile, each one there to make you smile on a rainy day.
They can say it all sounds crazy. They can say we've lost our minds.
I don't care if they call us crazy.
Run away to a world that we desire.
Every night I lie in bed, the brightness colors fill my head, a million dreams are keeping me awake. I think of what the world could be, a vision of the one I see, a million dreams is all it's gonna take. Oh, a million dreams for the world we're gonna make. However big, however small, let me be part of it all. Share your dreams with me. 'Cause every night I lie in bed, the brightest colors fill my head. A million dreams are keeping me awake. A million dreams. I think of what the world could be, a vision of the one I see. A million dreams is all it's gonna take. A million dreams for the world we're gonna make. For the world we're gonna make.
So how many of you good Reston folks have traveled through New England at some point and visited or at least driven past some of our wonderful old historic UU churches? How many have done that? Okay, a majority of you. Well, as you know then, all throughout New England, most especially in Massachusetts, there are a host of simple, beautiful, white clapboard churches which sit on the town square. Do we have slides today? Okay, great, there it is. This is our church in Wayland, Massachusetts, a perfect and beautiful example of a classic white clapboard Yankee meeting house. Now most of these proud liberal congregations date back to the 18th and 19th centuries, when Unitarianism and Universalism thrived under the influence of both Transcendentalism. You know the guys, mostly guys, Emerson, Hawthorne, Thoreau, Whitman, but Elizabeth Peabody also, and all the other great American Enlightenment thinkers and liberal Christian thought. For both Unitarianism and Universalism, although liberal, were clearly within the Christian fold in the first two American centuries. Although the theology and social outlook taught in these historic UU buildings was enlightened, optimistic, and liberal, several practical aspects of congregational life in that time were less, shall we say, a little less warm and fuzzy. For starters, most of these old meeting houses in which those hardy New Englanders gathered for worship were, you may be surprised to know, unheated. They had little or no heat in winter and could only, of course, be cooled in summer by opening the windows. Here is pictures of our historic old ship church in Hingham, Massachusetts. It is, to my knowledge, the oldest standing church in America, built in 1681 through wood and peg construction by local shipbuilders. I preached there one February windy day, and the whole church was creaking like the inside of an ancient ship. It just creaked and groaned through my whole sermon. It's an amazing building. I called the minister there, Ken Brown, who's been there for 35 years, in preparation last week for this sermon, and it had, when it was built, per my comments, no furnace or central heat to keep the people warm. Ken said that it was not until 1825, almost 150 years after it was built, that the congregation finally installed 2 simple potbelly stoves near the front of the chancel to give the folks just a little heat. So in the early days of our movement, there was, in most of our churches, little or no heat. And in the coldest months of winter in particular, those attending Sunday service often faced frigid temperatures not much warmer than those to be found outdoors. And you've all heard stories about how tough and stoical old New Englanders were and are reputed to be. Perhaps they came by this naturally by those unheated churches on Sunday morning. I found this amazing description in a history written about one of those old New England churches for your benefit. Quote, "Men attending church were so bundled and wrapped with scarves that they could barely walk. Women wore up to 7 petticoats, many shawls and capes, and woolen gloves. The more wealthy had servants to carry their foot warmers made of iron that held live coals. Others had heated bricks wrapped in blankets to supply warmth. 3 women, this author writes, had fat poodles they brought to church with them as foot warmers." But notwithstanding all these measures, he writes, some women caught cold and died from chills they caught in church. You think church is dangerous now? Go back 2 centuries. Okay, now, despite this dire report of these women dying from chills in church, I really don't think the lack of heat in our early churches caused many deaths. But the fact is that going to church in New England in the winter in those early days was hardly comfy and hardly a cozy experience. And some of the sermons ran for an hour to an hour and a half to an hour and 45 minutes. Sit through that sometime soon. Sunday in old New England was pretty stark and pretty puritanical. But as a partial remedy to this frigid situation, as that brief description I read you just a minute ago indicated, individual families, of course, were bundled up very heavily, but they would often bring to church a contraption called a foot warmer. Now, I wasn't able to lay my hands on a real foot warmer to show you because they're very rare and they're ancient relics of the early American church. But here is a picture of an early American foot warmer. It was a tin with holes punched in it so the heat could get out, and live coals would be put in that. And each family then would bring its own foot warmer from their hearths in New England, which of course were kept stoked 24 hours a day with coal or with wood because that's all that New England had to heat its hearths, and then carry the contraption to church, placing it beneath their own seats, their own pew. Now, the pews in those early days were often boxed pews like these, and this is one of our churches. And so there were family-sized sections of seats with doors separated from one another by a 3-foot wood high divider. Our church, King's Chapel, has a box reserved for the king. And to this day, only the King of England can sit in that boxed pew in downtown Boston. You didn't know that, probably. Anyway, the walls kept drafts and other families out of their pew. So in those rugged individualistic times, if you wanted heat in church, you had to bring it yourself. And of further historical interest, some of you may not know, that if you wanted a good pew for your family in the best middle front section of church where you could see and hear what was going on, you essentially had to buy one. You had to buy your own pew seat. The church I served right out of seminary, the First Church of Holton, Maine, there it is, formed in 1811, was typical. When I arrived there in 1974, still on the back wall was a pew chart with all the family names assigned to each pew, left over from the 19th century, so that no one would sit in the wrong place. And so, for example, in the old days of that church, there was a Campbell pew and a Holden pew and an Inman pew and a Peabody pew, and dare any of them sit. And they were all, by the way, all descendants of the original founders of that church, but they did not sit in one another's pews. In fact, when I was there in the mid-70s, some of those descendants sat in those same pews that had been in their family for 4 generations. Amazing. Now, even though this non-egalitarian practice of selling pew subscriptions has long been abandoned by Unitarian Universalism, in the early days of our New England churches, and this went for the Presbyterians and the Baptists and the Congregationals and Anglicans and Lutherans too, every family had their proper, paid-for place to sit in with the best pews costing the most. The early American church then was neither egalitarian nor warm. When it came to attending church, it was literally everyone for themselves, every family for itself. As my colleague Chris Rabel put it, once one was seated with one's family in one's own pew with the door closed, one could be quite cozy, especially if one had a foot warmer full of live coals to radiate its heat into your enclosed space. If one were warm, one thought very little of the possible cold of others in their pews in some other part of the church. And as history reports that those early New Englanders surrendered their individualism and their stern traditions hesitantly. Let me tell you a fascinating story about what happened to the First Parish Church in Rome, Massachusetts, which sadly, like many of our old New England congregations, no longer exists as a religious congregation today. Here is an old postcard picture of their original wood frame building in Rome, Massachusetts. In 1787, the church called its second minister the Reverend Persevered Smith. Don't you love that name? He must have persevered through a lot of stuff that ministers persevere through. We actually like to think of ourselves as long-suffering, but it's really not true. Anyway, Reverend Persevered Smith, he, like many of the congregational clergy of the period, was slowly persuaded to what is known as the Unitarian position. And Jeff and Jill, you as old Congregationalists know perhaps this whole story, which meant that he came to theologically reject the prevailing doctrines of the Trinity, the belief that God was a triune reality of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and that he came to accept the Unitarian contrary position, which saw God as a singular, unified spirit of creation. And all over New England, during what is now called by the religious historians the Great Unitarian Controversy in about 1826, a lot of the first parish churches, which were just congregational, they split over this theological disagreement between Unitarian and Trinitarian thinking over the nature of God, with the Unitarians and Trinitarians originally, anyway, they fought over this. And of course, they fought over who got the building. When they split, they fought over who got the building, not to mention the hearts and the minds of the townspeople. Now, usually, if the minister declared himself a Unitarian, and if the majority of that congregation agreed with this thinking, the liberals would get to keep the building, and the Trinitarians would have to stomp across the street and build their own church in defiance, and vice versa. Majority rules in congregational churches. Here's an example of two New England churches, one Unitarian and one Trinitarian, staring each other down from across the town square. As Chris Rabel writes, many a New England town to this day thus has two church buildings glowering at each other from across the street, usually, by the way, on the town square, which is owned by the public. Believe me, these Unitarian, Trinitarian battles were extremely hard fought in many New England towns. People took their theology seriously in those days. But in any case, back to our relevant story about the church in Rowe. In 1821, Persevered Smith declared himself a Unitarian, which did not surprise many of them because he'd been preaching there for 34 years and had undoubtedly been preaching his Unitarian values. And so when he declared himself a Unitarian, the congregation went along with this. Now, the now dusty church records report that there was no split in that church, no controversy, no division, no 40% of the people walking across the street. They all followed Reverend Smith's leadership into Unitarianism. The church formally became Unitarian and went on its liberal, merry way. But, just 2 years later, the church did split institutionally, not over theology, but over heating technology. It seems that some radical soul, 2 years later, proposed that the church install, heaven forbid, a stove, a furnace, so that foot warmers would no longer be necessary and all who attended church would feel the warmth. As Chris Rabel tells the story, the proposal for the stove was adopted. The church installed the stove, but a number of members were so upset that they withdrew in outrage, moved down the street, and built another unheated church. So the church, Rabel writes, split not over the centrality of theology, but over the centrality of the heating system. I swear this is true. Now, why 2 centuries later am I telling you this story this morning at UUCR? This curious, quaint, albeit minor historical tale about the 19th century schism in First Parish, Rowe, Massachusetts. Well, as today, if you need a reminder, this is Stewardship Sunday. You knew this was coming. And it's my task, a task I take on gladly as the minister every time at this year, to encourage and hopefully inspire you to pledge and pledge generously to this congregation's next year's operating budget, which is all the more critical because we are still in this transition phase of getting back to welcoming newcomers, getting back to welcoming new members. The existing congregation has got to reach out in a little deeper into its wallets to help us see through this pivotal year. I believe as you ponder your commitment to this wonderful institution, your emotional commitment and your financial commitment, this quaint 19th century struggle over foot warmers and furnaces may be instructive. For you see, the generosity of your giving over the next period of weeks will determine, it is up to us to decide whether we are a foot warmer congregation or a furnace congregation. Now, what do I mean by this? Obviously, on a technological level, we are already a furnace congregation, actually a heat pump congregation. And with our new system that you voted last Sunday to install for over $200,000, we'll be a state-of-the-art heat pump congregation. No foot warmers necessary here, and no private air conditioners or private fans required in the summer. We have made sure that everyone here is going to be warm and cozy in the winter and cool and comfortable during the summer. And we'll have a system that will keep us all safe from whatever viruses creation throws at us, hopefully. This new system, which is costing over $200,000, will come from the capital fund, not from your yearly pledges and contributions of support. But this information aside, when I talk on the Stewardship Sunday about a foot warmer congregation versus a furnace congregation, I'm not, of course, talking literally about technology. I am speaking figuratively about how committed we are as members and friends to the dreams and possibilities of this community of faith that is our congregation. Frankly, I pray that when our stewardship campaign is completed in a few weeks, we will not prove ourselves a parsimonious, individualistic, foot-warmer congregation, if you can go with this image, but rather a bold and larger furnace congregation with plenty of resources for our mission out in the world and for ourselves, that we will fund ourselves and our work in the world. I pray we will have a commitment to the larger possibilities of what this community can become amongst ourselves, and even more importantly, out in the world and wider community, which, as you all know, so needs our Unitarian Universalist vision and values. A furnace congregation has a great shared engine, if you will, of commitment and vision and purpose and faith. In a furnace congregation, people see beyond themselves and their own immediate feet being warm, and to the whole institution, that it might be transformational and healing of persons and society. So, today, as we focus on our annual stewardship campaign, which is now underway, the question, I think, is simple and straightforward. Are we going to be a foot-warmer congregation, a low-grade, lackluster, lukewarm community which is underfunded and unenthusiastic, or are we going to be a furnace congregation, a religious community that radiates, if you will, the warmth and power and duty of our Unitarian Universalist faith to make a real positive difference in our lives and in the world beyond? Let me assure you, right here and now, that it is one whole lot harder to be a furnace congregation than it is to be a foot-warmer congregation where you just come to get your own spiritual needs met, you're a consumer only, and you don't keep the wider vision in sight. Let me say all this a little differently. It is not the furnace, or more accurately, the climate control system, that makes everything we do here possible. It is really what drives this place, what the fuel of this place is, our Unitarian Universalism. Our principles, our dream, and our 500-year commitment of social justice and community service to make this world a better place. That's what has always driven us. Reflect for just a moment on the kind and quality of religious community we have. Each Sunday we gather here to take ourselves deeper spiritually, and in the Sunday school, we're working with our kids to give them values and attitudes for life. In partnership with me as a minister, our caring circle reaches out to members and friends in need of personal support. The Learning and Engagement Committee works to provide a wide variety, and we're going to get back to that stuff now that COVID is, I pray, fading into the background. Provide enrichment and spiritual journey work for members and non-members alike. Our gardening committee was here Friday working, one person anyway, working to keep these beautiful grounds beautiful on this 6-acre site here at Wiehle Avenue. And there are so many, and our social justice work. I just want to remind you what kinds of work we do in our community. The Hypothermia Project to protect the homeless in the winter. The Clothes Closet, which provides so much needed clothing. The Voice organization, Virginia's Organized for Interfaith Engagement, which stands for equal opportunity and peaceful change in our community. The Alternate Gift Market, every December, which raises many thousands of dollars for worthy organizations. The Cornerstones Anti-Poverty Agency, which does so much to help so many disadvantaged folks in our neighborhoods. The work right now, currently, of our refugee and asylum seekers all around the world, most especially the people of Afghanistan, and maybe soon we'll need to take in some, I'm blanking, some refugees from Europe. I mean, there are going to be millions of new refugees. The Ukrainian people have got to come somewhere, many of them, while this insanity rages on, and maybe we'll welcome some of them here. We have a partnership with UUSC, the UUs for Social Justice, which is a DC-based agency, the Jennifer Mitchell Memorial Scholarship Fund, which we established in 1990, provide college scholarships and monies for hardworking disadvantaged students. Our support of the LGBTQ community, which is represented by our beautiful flag that got put back up this week, and our leadership with Gay Pride Reston. And lastly, our special Sunday collections. We took one this morning for the Ukrainian people. This congregation, need I remind you, is alive 7 days a week with the work of Unitarian Universalism. And for our size, I think we are as busy and engaged as any proactive UU congregation gets. We're busy with the work of our faith, and there's so much more to do as we begin to gather again. We can regin and reactivate a lot of our work amongst ourselves and in the wider community. Faith is the real sustaining furnace of this church. And as your minister, I am so very proud at how deeply and passionately and seriously and well you serve our faith here in Northern Virginia. So, with all this about our wonderful and busy congregation said, there is a catch. And the catch is that takes money. Dough, moolah, greenbacks, Benjamins. I looked this up and I said synonyms for money. Big bucks, bread, to keep this place running. It costs a lot to make sure there's heat, light, water, air conditioning so we can comfortably gather. It takes money to pay our mortgage and insurance, do the landscaping, keep the floors clean, fund our programs, and have I mentioned to pay the wonderful staff? And you have, let me just pause there with some appreciation. You have a wonderful staff. Beth and Cynthia and Jesse and Linda are wonderful, above average, like Garrison Keeler's Lake Wobegon. You know, all the men and women are above average, and these folks are. They are wonderful, and we need to remember that we need to remunerate them honorably. The bottom line, and hey folks, you all knew this was coming this morning, this is Stewardship Sunday, is that what it's going to take to properly fund this place. The bottom line is that we need every member and friend not to think about making a foot warmer pledge, but making a generous furnace pledge, a generous pledge that may stretch you a bit, that will enable our community to thrive. And again, I want to say it again, this is a transitional year. We need the existing members and friends to dig just a little deeper to get us back into the normal flow of congregational life, which I believe is happening this year. And Cara is about to say just a couple more words about that, so I'll shut up on that point. But please, whether or not our congregation will become the best, most effective, and most deeply spiritual church it can be, whether it will vibrantly serve its own members and the wider world, is utterly dependent upon your level of generosity and commitment. The foot warmer will not do anymore. We need a furnace commitment straight from the heart, straight from your pocketbook, if this congregation and all of us are going to reach our potential. I cannot, as your minister, ask you for less, for what we do here is precious and holy business that deserves the best we have. So please give your best to this community of faith. Give your time, give your energy, give your spirit, and yes, give your money, whether it's time or talent or treasure, for what we give to this place will come back to enrich us and hopefully greatly enrich and maybe even save this deeply troubled world of ours. Amen. So, Cara, it's your turn.
Thank you, Reverend Scott. It's Stewardship Sunday. I'm excited. Next week, we are going to be hosting our gala. This year, we are hosting it virtually. You'll should have received in your emails an invitation to the gala. It will be done in a telethon style. Randy and I will be co-hosting, and we hope that we will have a really good time and be able to build up our fund for the next year. And that is next Saturday, March 12th at 7 p.m. So just log on, look for that invitation. So today is really the launch, the kickoff. Tomorrow and in the next few days, also, you will be receiving your pledge cards, a letter from us, and hope that you will reply either in a pledge, or you can go online and enter in your pledge for the year. For those of you who are newer or less familiar with the stewardship process, this is how we fund our church, how we live into our values and be able to have our church here, and the faith that we cultivate here, which is of the utmost importance. I believe that we are a furnace community. In fact, I see it. I've spoken to so many of you, and we are a generous community that I am very grateful to be proud of. So while we are gathering pledges over the next couple of weeks, I hope that we will be able to reach our pledge, our budget that has been set by the board of $385,000. That is the same budget that was set for us for last year and that we did not meet. And I know that we can do it this year. Jesse and I have committed to doubling our pledge this year, and we hope that those with means, because we all know that in these last few years, the economy has had an effect on all of us in one way, shape, or form. And I know that in my household, we were gifted with extra. So that will go towards the church as a dedication of our faith and our love for this community and for the work that we do. I hope that you will think similarly and give as generously as you are able. And I hope to see you on Saturday. And the deadline for getting your pledge into us is the end of March 30th. So if you're taking a little bit of time to consider what you want and what you can actually give, you have time until the end. So March 30th. Thank you very much.
The closing hymn this morning is number 1014, Answering the Call of Love. We're going to play a video from UU Fairfax. Thank you very much to the director of music there, Laura Weiss. The words will be in your chat box. If you're at home, please sing along. And if you're here in person with us, you may hum with hymn 1014. Thank you.
The promise of the Spirit, faith, hope, and love abide, and so every soul is blessed and made whole. The truth in our hearts is our guide. We are answering the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one. Emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim. We are answering the call of love.
Sometimes we build a barrier to keep love tightly bound, corrupted by fear, unwilling to hear,
Denying the beauty we found. We are answering the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one. Emboldened
love will not divide. Reflections of grace in every embrace, fulfilling the vision divine. We are answering the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one, emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim we are answering the call of love. We are answering the call of
And our closing words this morning come from the Reverend Dan Hotchkiss. Bob is helping me. If we are proud of this spiritual community, let us make it a higher personal priority.
If you are concerned for its future, may you help to shape and realize its vision.
If its values resonate with yours, may we live them out with daring and devotion.
This congregation cannot prosper nor fulfill its purpose without our faith, our support, our commitment, and witness.
Its destiny and its bright promise depend on each one of us. Amen. Okay, Joanne.
We invite our congregants worshiping on Zoom to join us for our virtual Greet Your Neighbor coffee hour today to discuss the service theme and enjoy fellowship with other congregants. The link is in the chat box and will be on a forthcoming slide. Those here in person are invited to help themselves to coffee or tea in the back of the sanctuary. This week we are going to be outside with our tea and coffee on the deck, visiting together. The chairs are to be set up, to leave the chairs as they are set up after worship. And we're going to continue to do that. We hope you will use the chat box as a virtual receiving line to leave a message about your appreciation for the worship service.
The postlude this morning is another virtual choir video that we made, feels like a long time ago. The Love is the Spirit of this Church, Not Our Covenant, that's just the name of the song, by Elizabeth Alexander. And we actually found out recently that she loved the virtual video that we made so much that she put it on her website and has circulated to other UU congregations and has been played a bunch of times. I forget all the congregations that it was played at, but it's been played a lot. So the beginning parts of the video that were just kind of the testimonials were cut out. So this is just the song, but I really hope you enjoy Love is the Spirit of this Church by Elizabeth Alexander.
My church is built of neither brick nor stone, for its love as the spirit of this church. It's a shelter fashioned from our hearts alone. Yes, it's love as the spirit of this church. Oh, it's love. Yes, it's love. Yes, it's love as the spirit of this church. Oh, yes, not the walls or steeple, but a gathered people is what makes up It is consecrated by the greater good. Yes, it's love, that's the spirit of this church. For it's love, yes, it's love, yes, it's love, it's love, that's the spirit of this church. Not a wall, people, but together, people is the nature of the spirit. That's the spirit, love is the spirit. That's the spirit, love is the spirit. That's the spirit, love is the spirit.
Watching our congregation grow as beautifully as our church gardens.
That's the spirit, love is the spirit.
Creating a loving and supportive community for all.
That's the spirit, love is the spirit.
Flying the first pride flag in Reston, Virginia.
That's the spirit, love is the spirit.
Providing a space for all people to be their authentic selves.
That's the spirit, love is the spirit.